This video idea was suggested by DiCaprio DeLorean, Whiskey Fett, Jar Master, Sean Nasuti, Devil Luke Lala, and Admiral Preparedness, who I think actually might have been a little bit too excited for this video. Regardless, if you have any suggestions for future videos, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. The Wonders of Life Pavilion was the last one to open in Epcot Center's Future World. Its health and fitness theme was one of the leading factors in making Epcot known as an educational theme park. While the concept may not have been as interesting as other in-park options, Wonders of Life made up for that with its unique atmosphere and subject matter. It also helped the Pavilion house one of Epcot's first thrill attractions. Since we're covering the entire Pavilion, I'll get around to talking about that attraction and its fate in a minute, but for now, let's talk about the Pavilion itself's history. The concept of a health, life, and fitness themed pavilion at Epcot had been around since the mid-70s, when Epcot as a theme park was still being conceptualized. By 1978, the concept was finished. Originally, the building was designed to be circular, and with other sections branching off from the main hub. Those sections would house its rides and attractions. Here are a few of the attractions planned for the pavilion. A dark ride showing guests the inner workings of the human body, a rotating show called Good Health Habits in a Carousel of Progress S-Theater, an animatronic show with characters representing emotion, intellect, and the nervous system, another show called Tooth Follies taking visitors into the human mouth, and lastly an educational movie called The Joy of Life. But without any money to devote to the project and with no companies wanting to sponsor it, the concept sat for at least 5 years, until the mid-80s when MetLife finally agreed to sponsor it. The company then put $100,000 towards construction of the pavilion and its attractions. With a new budget to adhere to, the first set of changes came to the original concepts. Some attractions were scrapped altogether, like the rotating show for example, as it would have just taken up too much space. Along with that, Tooth Follies was canned also, since there was already another show planned for the pavilion. That show being Head Trip. It was around this time that Head Trip cut back to having just one animatronic character instead of the original 3. The story was then reworked, and the new show was renamed Cranium Command. The movie The Joy of Life was also replaced by a different short film called Making Me, which was about 15 minutes long, and like the film before, it focused on conception and birth, tying into the pavilion's overall theme of life and the human body. Eventually, after some tweaking, all these ideas were agreed upon and finished. Construction began on the pavilion in January of 1988, and finished 1 year later. When the Wonders of Life Pavilion opened in 1989, it was a pretty big deal. Plenty of visitors as well as Disney higher-ups, including Michael Eisner, the then CEO, were all there for its grand opening. When the pavilion was completed, there were some things that changed from its original concept, as well as some things that stayed the same. The building itself now wasn't just circular, but instead spherical. In the final version, it was a 6-story tall golden dome. Along with that, there was now a 76-foot tall statue of a double helix at the entrance. Originally, the sign was a huge archway that went over the footpath leading up to the building. Eventually, that was removed and replaced by a different sign off to the side of that same walkway. Interesting to note, the original archway sign has been moved to the Magic Kingdom and is now used as the entrance sign for their parking plaza. As for the pavilion itself, its inside hub area now resembled more of a circus rather than a carnival, and was renamed from the original Midway of Life to the new Fitness Fairgrounds. Besides the main attractions that still branched off from the main hub, there were now a bunch of new things to do in that area. There was a shop called Well and Good that sold athletic gear. Across from that was a restaurant called Pure and Simple, which sold healthy foods like veggie pizza as well as soups and salads. There were also the Wonder Cycles, which were stationary workout bicycles that would play footage as you pedaled. Another thing was the Sensory Playhouse and Audio Antics, which both tested guest senses with audio and visual illusions. Towards the center of the building, there were 3 theaters. The first one had a multimedia show called Goofy About Health. This wasn't as extensive as the other shows that played the surrounding theaters, as it only showed short clips of Goofy either exercising or eating healthy. Next to that was the Anatomical Theater, where actors and actresses would put on short skits about exercise and nutrition. Behind those two was the Birth Theater, which played the Making of Me movie every 15 minutes. But despite all these other things to do around the pavilion, guests would more often than not find themselves talking about its headlining attraction, Body Wars. A ride taking guests through the human body had been something that Imagineers wanted to do since the pavilion was in its earliest planning stages. In that time, it was little more than an idea accompanied by some basic concept art. No story to go along with it, and no real details on the ride were specified, since the pavilion wasn't as big of a priority as other attractions that already had sponsors lined up. When MetLife did sign on as a sponsor, Imagineers picked up where they left off, still with the idea that this would be a dark ride showing the inner workings of the human body just on a larger scale. The ride was now given the new name, The Incredible Journey Within. However, they quickly ran into a problem. The size of something like what was proposed would have easily been double the size of the pavilion itself. On top of that, the dark ride would have required real sets and props, something that would have been extremely difficult to do if parts of the body were to move accurately. The president of Disney Imagineering at the time, Marty Sklar, was later quoted as saying this: "We found that it was nearly impossible to move the huge set pieces. If you can think of a moving section of a lung, for instance, that was 30 feet high on a continuous basis as people rode through, you can imagine how ponderous and difficult that turned out to be." And difficult it was. So difficult, in fact, that when they couldn't find a workaround, the entire ride concept was thrown out. That is until they found a solution to the issue, and that solution came in the form of a new technology already very popular at Disneyland: simulators, and more specifically the simulator technology used on Star Tours. When Star Tours opened, its use of hydraulic motion-based ride vehicles was something that Disney had never tried before on an attraction. Despite how new the technology was, it worked wonders taking guests on a journey through Star Wars' fictional universe. Something that would have been very difficult to do with just props and sets in a dark ride setting, so now when Imagineers were faced with the same issue on the incredible journey within, it was no question that they would use the same technology that they had used on Star Tours. Sometime around 1987, the on-ride movie directed by Leonard Nimoy was created. Imagineers then matched the on-screen movements with a joystick. Those movements were recorded and later used on the actual ride vehicles. After that, other elements were recorded like the pre-show and on-ride video that showed the captain, now all starring popular actors at the time like Tim Matheson, Elizabeth Shue, and Dakin Matthews. Once all the pieces were put together, the attraction was ready to open, alongside the rest of the pavilion. Body Wars opened on October 19th of 1989. In its first years, the ride was met with a great response from park visitors, with Body Wars being the only thrill ride in Epcot at the time and being modeled after an attraction that Disney World guests wouldn't otherwise be able to experience. It was very popular. It's actually rumored that MetLife demanded that their version of the Star Tours simulator technology be opened before the Hollywood Studios version, so that way more people would be brought to the pavilion to try out the new simulator. That's likely the case, since Hollywood Studios' Star Tours didn't open until 2 months after Body Wars did in December of 1989. Even though a majority of guests liked the ride, it still made a lot of its fans sick. Back in the late 80s, when these simulator rides were still a new concept at theme parks, the idea of having a separate ride vehicle that would still let guests experience the ride just with all the effects wasn't really considered. Now something like this is a must, since we've seen it on rides like Mission Space with its orange and green team options. Technically speaking, they could have just stopped the ride movement on a certain one of the pods and just played the movie, and sometimes they did, either for expecting mothers or people with medical conditions, but this was still a rare occurrence, especially in the early days of the ride. Due to its huge popularity and only having 4 ride vehicles available at any given time, it would have been impractical to segregate just one pod to accommodate such a small portion of riders. Despite Disney's unwillingness to really make this attraction accessible to anybody besides thrill seekers, they did make a change in its first year of operation to decrease the ride's intensity, making it more enjoyable for a majority of park visitors. During the part where your vehicle is stuck in the lungs, you would originally seesaw back and forth for about 30 seconds. That was later edited down to about 5 seconds. If you pay close attention to the ride footage, you can actually see where they cut and fade the 2 clips together.
I see you!
Besides that, Body Wars didn't undergo any more major changes throughout its years of operation. That is, until 2001, when the entire Wonders of Life Pavilion was dealt a major blow. MetLife had continued to sponsor the Wonders of Life Pavilion for 2 years after their 10-year contract was up, but in June of 2001 they suddenly dropped their sponsorship entirely, apparently due to disputes over life insurance benefits for Disney employees. Shortly after that, signage was removed and changed to eliminate any mentions of MetLife from the building. Now with no funding to keep the pavilion up to date, it essentially froze in its 2001 state for the next 3 years. For most other Future World pavilions, losing a sponsor wasn't that big of a deal, but the loss of MetLife really crippled the Wonders of Life Pavilion. There was such an emphasis on showcasing new scientific and medical breakthroughs that when it no longer did that, it became a lot less educational and relied heavily on its other attractions. Nowhere else was this shown more so than in the Frontiers of Medicine area. What would once be constantly updating and changing to show what was happening in the world of medicine now sat untouched and behind a wall for years. While the pavilion remained open, in the years following, its smaller attractions started to slowly close. The Anatomical Theater closed, followed by Coach's Corner. After that, Well and Good alongside Pure and Simple shut down too. Even the Wonder Cycles were disabled and covered up. By 2001, maintenance on the still functioning rides and attraction was virtually non-existent. Body Wars would constantly break down, and guests began to avoid the pavilion altogether in favor of a newer and more interesting thrill ride that had recently opened: Test Track. With the new competition that Test Track provided, Body Wars fell out of style since it no longer held the monopoly on thrilling ride experiences at Epcot. Another huge blow came in 2003 when Mission Space opened, another thrill ride situated directly beside the Wonders of Life Pavilion. Now with 2 brand new thrill rides in the eastern part of Future World, the whole Wonders of Life Pavilion was continually empty. Even Body Wars, which almost always had wait times upwards from 90 minutes just 5 years prior, was now a walk-on. In early January of 2004, the pavilion switched to seasonal operation, and only opened when the park was at capacity. Wonders of Life continued to open seasonally for the next 3 years, until 2007 when it officially closed. The pavilion's closing didn't cause as much of an uproar as something like Horizons did, for example. Not too many people loved the Wonders of Life or its attractions at that point, since they'd become so outdated and dilapidated in the last couple years. Sure, there were some die-hard Body Wars fans who were sad to see a classic go, but for the most part, people were eager to see what would go into the space and bring it into the 21st century, alongside all the other attractions in Future World East, which at that point had all either been updated or changed altogether. The pavilion's reopening came sooner than people expected. Just 9 months after its closure, Wonders of Life was reopened. Now it's the festival center for Epcot's 2007 Food and Wine Festival. While there were still kiosks set up around World Showcase, a new festival center housed a bunch of seminars, lectures, and classes. That festival center, of course, being the Wonders of Life building. The only issue was the pavilion still largely resembled what it used to be. None of the attractions were removed, signage was still up for Body Wars, and general theming hadn't even been touched. The space continued to be used in the following years for the Food and Wine as well as the Flowers and Garden Festival, serving as the main hub for both. As the years went on, the pavilion began to look less and less like its previous incarnation as the Wonders of Life. Let's look at all the changes made to it from 2007 to today. Once the pavilion closed, its most noticeable changes came. The Wonders of Life entrance sign was removed and replaced by a temporary Food and Wine Festival sign that gets changed out every year. Along with that, the sign of the building was covered by Food and Wine banners that would also change yearly. The huge double helix was taken down in August of 2007, alongside the entrance sign. As time progressed, more trees were added and grown out around the entrance of the building to hide its now defunct Golden Dome. Cranium Command's huge marquee was mostly taken down by the 2007 reopening, and what remained of it was used as a small stage. By 2009, it was removed altogether in favor of a bigger stage that is now used for culinary demos. The Burr Theater, which previously housed the Making Me film, stayed closed, but didn't have any of its signs removed until 2008, when its exterior was repainted and started showing the new Seasons of the Vine movie. The exterior was repainted again in 2013, but the movie remained the same. Both the Goofy About Health and Anatomical theaters were ultimately stripped down, repainted, and turned into stages. Most of the interactive elements of the pavilion, like the Wonder Cycles, were gone before its reopening. That is, except for the Sensory Playhouse, which has slowly been stripped down to nothing and is used as a retail space / shopping area. The Body Wars queue was still intact, and its signage still visible in 2007. 1 year later, the mural was painted over, and 2 years after that, the Body Wars lettering was removed. The queue entrance is still used as a standby line for wine seminars, but any part that extends beyond the dome is now used for storage. The details of what happened to the attraction itself are a bit fuzzy too, mainly because it wasn't changing right out in the open, and anybody who found out any information about it technically wasn't supposed to know. Some urban explorers managed to sneak back behind curtains and get a few pictures and videos before the ride vehicles were removed sometime in 2010. It's believed that when Star Tours The Adventure Continues was being developed, pieces of it were tested on what used to be Body Wars, since the ride mechanics were near identical. Sometime after that, all 4 cabins were dismantled and removed. Rumored to be sent to Hong Kong's Disneyland, but more than likely stripped down for spare parts to be used on the new Star Tours that reopened at Hollywood Studios in 2011. The Wonders of Life suffered one of the worst deaths out of all the original Epcot pavilions. Its decline from park must-do to deserted building was painfully slow, and with no replacement, it's the only Future World East pavilion to sit empty year-round. Well, the only pavilion that's meant to be empty year-round. While it remains dormant today, there's no telling what its real fate could be. Will it stay at the convention center for future festivals? Will an Inside Out themed attraction take it over like many people speculate? Will the whole dome be demolished in favor of something completely new? Who knows? What I do know is that the Wonders of Life is an iconic piece of Epcot Center, and while the pavilion nowadays is something to be looked over, its ability to combine fun and education was something that made Epcot a lot different from the other Disney theme parks. A difference that, unfortunately, we see less and less of every day, with the constant character integration into Epcot attractions. It's always sad to see a piece of the old Epcot go, but hopefully the future of the Wonders of Life is a good one, no matter what happens to it.